Hi, this is Sue Jackson of the Book by Book blog, and I'm here with another Friday Reads. I am fully immersed in the Big Book Summer Challenge, reading and listening to my first two big books of the summer. You can join the challenge too. Everyone is welcome. You set your own goals, so it's whatever you want it to be, whether that's one big book during the summer or, like I like to do, a whole series of them. And for the purposes of the challenge, a big book is any book with 400 or more pages. Audios count, ebooks count, YA, middle grade, graphic novels, anything where the print edition has more than 400 pages is a big book for the challenge. And there are a lot of people enjoying this already, and we've got some great conversations going on in the Goodreads group, so join the fun. So here's what I've started reading for Big Book Summer. I like to kick the summer off with something fast-paced. Give me a nice start for the whole Big Book Summer fun. So I started with Billy Summers by Stephen King. This is, as are most of his, quite a chunkster. But as you can see, I've only been reading it about a week and I'm almost finished already. As always, Stephen King just writes such compelling stories. I have been staying up way too late every night reading. It's wonderful. It's even better than I had heard. So last week I described this as a thriller. That's the way I had heard it pitched, but it's not exactly a thriller. There's not all that much action and suspense. It's really more of a character study, and it is perfectly titled. It is about Billy Summers, the man at the center of this story. So Billy is a hitman. Some really bad guys from Vegas have hired him to do a big job with an even bigger payout. And Billy decides this is going to be his last professional hit. He doesn't want to do this anymore. So at the very beginning, you don't know much about Billy, just that he is a professional hitman. But the book is all from his perspective. So you also know that he's pretty smart, but he doesn't let the people that hire him know that he's smart. So Billy kind of puts on this persona for the people that hire him that he thinks of as the dumb self. He doesn't want them to know that he's smarter than he appears. So that's all you really know about Billy at the very beginning, and that he's a reader. And this is a book that is about books. Specifically, there's a book within the book. This last hit, the guy that hires Billy sets him up in a small city. This is different than most jobs. They want him to live in the city for several months at least, until this guy that he's supposed to kill is extradited back to the state, and they want him to kill him as he's walking into the courthouse. So they have to wait for the extradition to take place. And so they want Billy settled in the city and just fitting in so that there's nothing unusual. People are used to seeing him so that he doesn't stand out on that when that day finally comes. So he does this. What he doesn't expect, and of course they've got him set up under a different name, and his cover is that he's a writer and that his agent has brought him to the city and set him up in this office that has a window looking out on the courthouse to finish his novel because he's on a deadline with the publisher and he hasn't been keeping up with it. So that's the story. That's their cover story. So Billy figures as long as he's pretending to be a writer, he might as well actually write because it's something he's been wanting to try for a long time. So he sits down and begins writing his own life story. So that book that Billy's writing is in this book. And you get it pieces at a time as he's writing it. And so little by little, as the story goes on, you're learning more and more about Billy, his horrible childhood, where he came from, his military service, equally horrific. And you're getting to know Billy better and better. But even in his put-on persona of David in this city during this summer, he gets to know his neighbors. He gets to know the people whose offices are near his. And he kind of really does settle in more than he expected to. So I said it's a character study, and it is. It's all about Billy, but also a lot happens here. There's a lot of waiting in the novel on Billy's part, but things are happening while he's waiting. And once he actually does shoot the man, then there's a whole nother series of things that happen. I am loving this book. It is completely immersive. As I said, like with all Stephen King novels, it is just so compelling. You just keep turning the pages. You want to know more. You want to find out what happens next. Highly recommend Billy Summers. And if you've stayed away from Stephen King because you don't like horror, this is not horror. As I said, many people call it a thriller. It's really a close-up look at this man who has been working as a hitman. There is some violence in it, particularly as Billy writes about his military experience. He went through some pretty awful stuff, but it's a book with incredible emotional complexity, and I'm really enjoying Billy Summers by Stephen King. And on audio, I am also listening to my first big book of the summer on audio, The House of Impossible Beauties by Joseph Cassara. And this is a very different kind of book, although it's a character study in its own way, but of a whole group of people rather than just one person. It is set in mostly the 80s. It begins in the late 70s, and I'm only partway through. It may go into the early 90s, but much of it takes place during the 80s in New York. It's about a group of gay and transgender teens and young people, young adults, as they make their way in the world, try to figure out who they are, mostly just try to live a happy life like anyone would, but under terrible circumstances, because of course they're discriminated against. There's the threat of AIDS. Lots of these kids endured abuse and other terrible things as children and teens. So you meet the characters one by one, and their stories gradually come together, which I always enjoy in a book. So there's Angel. Angel at the beginning is still living at home. He was born a boy, but he feels like a girl, and he's begun as a teenager experimenting with dressing as a woman outside of the house. And his brother is supportive. We don't know much about his mom yet, but mostly he and his brother are taking care of themselves. But when she's out in the world, Angel wants to feel beautiful. She's just starting to dress like a woman, to go to clubs that way, and then one day she takes a chance and goes home that way and confronts her mother and her brother. So that's the beginning of Angel's story. And Angel is Puerto Rican, from the Puerto Rican part of the city. We also meet Thomas, who is a young boy, hangs out with his grandma a lot. His mom, he's got a single mother who's not around much. She's often dating men who are abusive or otherwise not good choices. But Thomas has a wonderful relationship with his Italian grandmother. The two of them love to watch the Gong Show together, which brought back memories. Thomas, even as a child, enjoys dressing up in his grandma's clothes, and she kind of gets into it with him. She likes dressing him up like Elizabeth Taylor and taking photos. Thomas eventually leaves home. You find out the circumstances of that later, and becomes known as Venus. Other characters are gradually introduced. Dorian, who is an older trans woman, kind of teaches Angel the ropes. Hector, who Angel falls in love with. And this is mostly at the beginning of the book. I'm not giving any spoilers. There's Daniel, a boy who comes to find this group. And eventually, the name refers to, I think mainly Angel, sets up a house. This was her and Hector's dream, to one day establish a home where people like them can feel like they have a home, like they have a family. And that's really what this book is about. This group of teens and young people who feel like misfits, finding where they belong, finding their people. It's a beautiful story. It's also very often a difficult, sad story. None of these young people had an easy life or an easy beginning, or an easy life now in the present day in the 80s. But I'm really enjoying getting to know this group of characters, going along on their journey with them. That's The House of Impossible Beauties by Joseph Cassara, my first big book on audio for the summer. So what are you reading this week? Let me know in the comments down below. And please, if you're interested in joining the fun, you can join the Big Book Summer Challenge too. I'll include the link down below, both to my video about Big Book Summer and also to my blog page, which is where you actually sign up. If you are a blogger or a YouTuber, you can sign up with a video or a blog post. If you're a reader, everyone is welcome to join. There's a Goodreads group that has some really fun big book discussions all summer long. So I hope you'll join the fun.